Today, we're going to try to build the world's nicest pickleball paddle. I've got a sheet of polypropylene honeycomb lined with fiberglass, but we're not going to stop there. A lot of pickleball paddles are made out of that today. What is like the most luxurious wood out there?
Rich mahogany.
But we're not going to use just mahogany. We've got a mahogany crotch veneer. Who does this? No one does this. This is crazy, but it's fun. So let's figure it out. So we're going to build a couple of these paddles because I have never actually built one. My hope is that they get better as we go. So we start out by cutting a template out on the laser. From the laser, we take that to a piece of plywood, we trace it, and then we move on to cutting it out with a jigsaw. Now with the jigsaw, you want to stay a little away from the line because we're not done at this point. We're going to take it to the sander and sand exactly to the line. Now our laser cut template is too thin to work with the router, so this is actually the jig to cut all the rest of the paddles. We got another surprise for you. We got a little curly walnut. Take the razor blade and cut it up into pieces. Trim the edges with an X-Acto knife to get a closer fit to what the paddle would look like. And then all it is some wood glue, and I kind of tape the edges and flip them over, and we clamp the hell out of it. I've never actually veneered anything, so this is a first for me, so I was happy when it turned out well. So next we're going to flush cut those edges to fit our jig. Cut off the extra veneer with an X-Acto knife, and then we set up the router to trim it to that template we made before. So this is our first paddle. You can see the final shape at this point. Next we're on to the handle. Now the handle is made out of this balsa wood, which is incredible stuff. It is as light as styrofoam, and it's almost like the texture feels like styrofoam. But it can be cut with a knife, and then the pickleball paddles have like a hexagon shape. So I just carve it down to what I think it needs to be. The front part of the paddle needs to be trimmed, as well as the two sides to make it thinner at the top. I end up getting thinner and thinner each paddle I make. And then we throw on the end cap, and it surprisingly fit pretty well. After that, I glue on the handles. I do a couple dabs of wood glue and then CA glue to get it to stick immediately. I clamp it, but I don't think it really was needed. I think in the next couple paddles, I don't even clamp it. Next, we're on to finishing. I use a oil-based polyurethane spray can. Really easy. I went outside for this. I don't think it was actually needed. Turns out pretty well. You can see those curls. Whew. We got some special ordered white vinyl tape to match the rest of this stuff, and I wrap the whole handle. In future paddles, I end up not wrapping the whole handle. Next, we're on to the edge guard and the wrap. I had the heater going, so I threw the edge guard down there and warmed it up to make the edge guard a little more malleable. I then try to fit it onto this paddle. All right, this isn't working. I just took this off. I've got a wider one that I got for the Honeycomb. The veneers just made it a little too wide, so let's try that again. After switching to a thicker edge guard this time, it worked well. The veneers just made it way too thick. Now we're on to the grip. You'll see it's got a little adhesive on the back side, and then you just start at the bottom of the paddle and you just start. I had to redo this a couple times to figure it out, but it's really
pretty easy. The very top you cut at an angle, put a little vinyl tape on the top. And this is our paddle number 1, a plywood core. It's 1/2 inch plywood with a veneer top. For our next paddle, it's going to be even simpler. This is just going to be made out of straight wood. I had some sapele sitting in the back of my truck that has been sitting there for a long time. It's real pretty stuff that's got some ribboning, but we just throw it through the planer. I planed it to the thickness of that thinner edge guard we couldn't get on the last paddle, so that we didn't waste an edge guard, and it fit perfectly this time. And just like the last panel, we trace it with our jig, cut it out with the jig saw, and then move on to the router where we clamp it all together and use the jig as our template and get an exact match. After that, we're on to shaping the handle. On this round, I made the piece just a little bit shorter. It went a little too high on the handle last time. Another trick I learned is to mark the end cap angles onto the handle pieces so that I had a angle that I was shaping towards. I love this balsa wood. It is so fun. I've never really carved stuff. I may have to carve something in the future. Then we're on to finishing. Same poly. Look at this ribbon sapele. It's real pretty. And then again, we throw the end cap on. One difference I do on this paddle is I tape the end cap, and then after putting the edge guard on, this one went on perfectly. I just tape the top where the edge guard meets the handle instead of taping the whole handle. Wrap it up with the grip again, little vinyl tape at the very top, and then this is paddle number 2. I'm feeling good. I know how to make a paddle. The first paddle took me like half a day, and the second paddle was like 1 to 2 hours after, and that was with finishing. So you can really figure out how to do this once you get going. All right, we are finally on to the mahogany crotch honeycomb core pickleball paddle. You'll see this veneer is wonky. Got some curves, and if you tried to flatten that, you'd crack it. So we got to get some veneer softener going. This is 15% glycerin and water. I just found some glycerin at Walgreens. And you just spray this stuff down. You let it sit for a minute, it'll start softening. But then on top of that, I got out the steamer and I steamed the wood to get it really malleable so that when we pushed it down, there'd be no cracking. So we got some cauls, and then we put paper towels down, put our wood in, and then clamp it flat. I switch out those paper towels maybe every 20 minutes for about an hour and a half. After those veneers have dried, we move on to gluing up the paddle. You can see this stuff is super flat now. We're using epoxy for this. I use a scale to measure, stick to stir, cup, and some gloves. You got to wear gloves when you're doing epoxy. Epoxy is a sensitizer, and if it gets on your skin, you become sensitive to it and have allergic reactions. So watch yourself out there, guys. Watch yourself. Wear your gloves. All right, now the stuff is ready to go. We're using a vacuum press. This is a new thing to me. It's called the Roar Rocket vacuum press. It's for making skateboards, but it's a hand pump vacuum press. So you don't have to buy the big expensive vacuum as well. This thing costs about $70. It's pretty affordable in the vacuum press world, if you ask me. Now I just throw it in the bag, make sure it's sealed, and then pump all that air out. It took about 60 seconds to pump all of that air out. It was not much. All right, it's the next day. Our vacuum held overnight. Oh, so we're almost to like 24 hours of it sitting in here.
God, let's hope it worked.
All right, getting it out of the bag was pretty easy, but getting this mesh off got harder, and then getting the balls off of the wood was almost impossible. This was not fun, and I definitely started freaking out at moments that I was not going to get this to work. And I'm going to let you watch me struggle. So I got it out of those calls, and I thought I was all clear. Little did I know that I was going to spend double the amount of time trying to get this blue tape off. After a whole bunch of picking at tape with my fingers and chisel and all that kind of stuff, this is as much tape as we can get off. The epoxy soaked through the wood into the tape, and it's just like become one with it. So there's not much more we can do by just picking it off. We're going to put a sander on it and see if we can sand it away without sanding through the veneer. Hope we can do it. So I started with 220, and I quickly realized that this stuff was just encased in epoxy, and I just jumped down to 120 and then went through the grits, brought it up to 220 again. Then the rest you've all seen twice before. We trace it out, cut it out with the jigsaw, do our final shaping with the router. I'm like, oh my, I mean, I had this idea. I just didn't know how happy it would make me feel when it was like real. Woo, yes! That guy was pumped up. Wow. Let's do some finishing now. I did about 3 or 4 coats. You can see it turned out really well. And then we were on to making the handle. You can see I shortened it yet again, carved the handle, stuck the end caps on, and then put the edge guard on. And then finally we wrapped up our grip tape, and we all ready for some final shots. I love the idea of taking the mundane, ordinary thing and turning it into like a fancy, nice, bougie object. So, if you got an idea for what I should turn into a bougie thing, comment below. Let's get that going. I would love to turn this into a series. And so, send your ideas in. Hopefully we can get rocking on them. It'd be fun.